Asteroid Gate hung against the starfield like an enormous, illuminated wheel, its spokes and rings alive with the motion of ships and the glow of habitation. From a distance, the station looked serene, a symbol of order at the edge of a chaotic frontier. Up close, it breathed like a city, with a heartbeat of docking alarms, corridor chatter, and the constant shuffle of commerce. Commander Milan Karungi watched one sector of that breathing city from the security gallery, eyes tracking status, windows more by habit than need. He knew the rhythms by feel now. Cargo spikes at shift change, power dips when the agricultural rings cycled their lights, the occasional spike of alert when some captain took a corridor turn too fast and clipped a beacon. He had a talent for patterns, for seeing the line between noise and signal. Right now, the pattern bothered him. "Traffic density through Port Sector Gamma is too high," he said quietly. Across the console, Specialist Rafi Kulkarni frowned at the data. "Still in nominal range, sir. It is. And it's wrong." Milan folded his arms. "Check reroute requests from independent freighters in the last 2 hours. Flag any originating address that bounces 3 times through third-party relays." Rafi typed, curiosity lighting behind his eyes. Milan could feel his analyst bracing for a puzzle. That was another pattern he loved. Give a human a knot, and they would take it apart for the joy of seeing how it worked. A soft chime announced an incoming delegation. The gallery's transparent wall dimmed automatically as a shuttle swept past outside and descended toward Dock 2. A mass of long-limbed figures moved inside its hull, partially obscured by filtered glass. "Arqathi envoy ship on approach," announced the duty officer. "Right on schedule, Commander." Milan nodded. "Let's see if we can keep the welcome peaceful this time." The Arqathi had no word for improvisation in their own language. They had borrowed the Terran term and wrapped it in qualifiers to make it palatable. They mistrusted anything not thoroughly planned. Putting them in the same room with half a dozen frontier traders, 2 Khareth mercenaries, and whichever local dignitaries wanted to bask in importance was a minor act of madness. But that was Asteroid Gate's job. And his. He keyed his wristcom. "Duarte, where are you?" Approaching Dock 2 came Dr. Keiko Duarte's voice, faintly breathless, steps echoing in the background. "Your Arqathi guests have already sent a revised protocol. Again." "Of course they have." Milan allowed himself a brief smile. "Anything urgent or just a different order to pour the tea?" "They request that representatives of the Terran outreach fleet stand 3 steps back from the primary reception line until after the 3rd greeting. Then make eye contact for roughly 3 seconds. No more, no less." "Why 3? "Their numerology committee feels it expresses balanced intent without overcommitting," Keiko said, a dry edge to her tone. "If you stare any longer, you're courting alliance. Or war, depending on who is counting." "Noted. I'll do my best not to start a war by blinking wrong." He cut the line off and studied the moving dots of the incoming shuttle, the escort tugs, the path of a lumbering ore hauler sliding beneath them. Somewhere in that dance would be the next problem. The station never ran out of those. What he did not know yet, what even Rafi's sophisticated filters could not see, was the shadow moving toward Asteroid Gate from the cold dark beyond the shipping lanes. The vessel called Umbral Knife had no transponder. Its profile was not in any database, because its builder had welded it together in a shipyard that technically did not exist. Its captain, Sira Kathani, rode in the dim light of its cockpit and watched the distant glimmer of the station grow, a pale ring around a bright star. She always watched targets first from a distance. It helped strip away the legend. Her handler had fed her recordings, footage of Milan Karungi mediating a border dispute, surveillance of him leading a fire team through a burning docking arm when a power relay had exploded, grainy clips from a settlement where he had pulled children out of fallen rubble. The Nhemari Pact's analyst had called him a stabilizing human asset of high value. The sum of their briefing, relayed through the Khareth Syndicate's carefully deniable channels, had been blunt. Remove the asset. Disrupt the talks. The way they had framed that last part annoyed her. Kill a person and you killed their deeds, their influence. That was enough. This layered talk of destabilization functions betrayed a kind of fear Sira disliked seeing in employers. Fear made plans stupid. Still, the pay had been extraordinary. and the contract clear. She had no reason to refuse, until her handler had mentioned the guarantee clause tied to her clan. "You will complete the contract, Sira Kathani," he had said, his voice perfectly neutral, "or the funds we have routed through your name will trigger consequences across your family's holdings." The client prefers certainty. The Khareth understood leverage well. Still, the idea of someone outside the clans wielding that kind of power had made something harden in Sira's chest. Now, as Umbral Knife coasted on low profile until it could slip into the shadow of a registered freighter, she opened the last part of the dossier. Personal notes, culled from informal sources, rumors. Humans, according to their enemies, were trouble. They rushed headlong into danger, ignored established hierarchy, when conscience pricked, bonded quickly, and broke slowly. They were absurdly easy to insult, and even easier to befriend. They adapted like parasites, learned from conflict, and had a tendency to pull other species into their orbit without meaning to. She scrolled past an offhand line. Do not underestimate their capacity for self-sacrifice. They will throw themselves in front of shots no one asked them to block. Ridiculous, she thought. Legend-making. Everyone liked to believe their enemies were uniquely special, as if that made victory over them more meaningful. She would strip away the story and leave a body. That was all. Asteroid Gate grew huge in the viewport, a slowly turning horizon of metal and light. Umbral Knife slid toward its shadow, a knife in need of a heart. On board, Sira checked the time. Her entry window into the station's maintenance alcoves would open 1 hour after the Arqathi delegation docked, when security focus shifted fully to diplomatic corridors. On that same clock, at roughly the same moment, Milan Karungi adjusted his formal jacket in the mirror of a side corridor and reminded himself not to tug at the collar like an irritated child. "Commander, your insignia is slightly misaligned," came Keiko's voice behind him. He turned. Keiko stood there, tablet hugged to her chest, her black hair pulled into a hasty knot. She wore civilian attire, a concession to the Arqathi's insistence on clear separation between diplomatic and military. She stepped forward and straightened his rank pins with practiced fingers. "You know," she said, glancing at his reflection, "some species take crooked insignia as a sign that you are deliberately respecting imperfection. It puts them at ease. Do the Arqathi? They file a protest about disrespect to established systems of order. In that case, thank you." They started toward the docking concourse together. The corridor opened onto a broad space lined with banners, screens displaying shifting constellations and welcome scripts in multiple languages. A small crowd had already gathered. Station officials in crisp uniforms, civilian representatives in their best duster coats and ceremonial beads. At the head of the line waited Admiral Jonah Petrov, hands clasped behind his back. He was older than Milan, weathered by service, a man whose temper rarely showed in his voice, but often in the set of his shoulders. There was a question in his eyes as Milan approached. "Are we ready?" Milan gave the smallest of nods. Everything they could control, they had. Docking clamps engaged with a deep vibration that rolled through the concourse. The air changed, humming just slightly as the station compensated for the pressure differential. The shuttle's outer doors opened with slow, ceremonious grace. The first Arqathi stepped onto the docking bridge, tall and narrow, skin catching the light like brushed metal. Telgor Sildrak, envoy of the Arqathi Council, moved with deliberate precision, each gesture its own speech. Keiko murmured translations as they exchanged greetings. Milan held his position exactly 3 steps back from the line, as instructed, hands open at his sides. When he met Telgor's gaze for the first time, he held it for what he counted as 3 measured heartbeats. The envoy dipped his head in acknowledgement. Milan filed away the tiny softening around the alien's eyes. First hurdle passed. While formal phrases washed over the concourse, while cameras recorded for the station-side news feeds and observers whispered about the historic talks about to begin, security systems tracked motion in the background. They did not notice the service hatch in Dock 5 opening and closing at an odd interval. Their heuristics did not flag the slight power drain of Umbral Knife's docking clamps slipping into a cold, unused section of the ring. Sira Kathani flowed out of the shadow of her ship like part of it, She carried no weapons where scanners could see, but had a dozen killing tools built into the seams of her environmental suit. Her gait shifted subtly once she was clear of cameras, adopting the posture and steps of a maintenance tech. She had memorized the station schematics until she could draw major corridors from memory. Her route to the viewpoints and air ducts overlooking the summit hall was already chosen. All that remained was to confirm her escape path. As she moved through the dim maintenance arteries, she tasted the air. Human habitats had a scent she had learned to recognize in the handful of contracts that had brought her near them. A mix of recycled air, oil, cleaners, food, spices, all tangled around something harder to name, a kind of restless presence, as if the walls themselves remembered movement. She pushed the thought aside. Anthropomorphizing infrastructure was a luxury for poets, not assassins. Inside the station's public spaces, time moved differently. By 2 p.m. station time, the concourses around the summit hall thrummed with an odd mix of tension and celebration. Banners of different species hung side by side. The Solara Accord insignia, a simple, stylized spiral, glowed in soft light above the main doors. Security checkpoints stretched like combs across each access route. Milan moved among them, a quiet center in the swirl, checking that each team knew their role, that contingency plans were ready. Ludmila Kadir, in charge of the Marine detachments, met him at the base of a checkpoint with a crisp report. "Perimeter stable, Commander. No anomalies in the last hour. Raffi's people cleared every vendor and staffer with corridor access. I don't like the crowding at the Western Gallery, though." "I looked at that," Milan said. "We can shift some of the viewing screens to the south balcony, spread them out, less pressure on a single route. Make it look like we just want better camera angles." "Understood." Ludmila's eyes flicked up to the massive windows overlooking the docking rings. "You really think someone would be dumb enough to try something on a day like this?" "Someone paid enough? Someone desperate enough? Yes." He did not need to add. If they were smart, they would aim for him outside of official spaces, somewhere unexpected. Assassinations during summits were old news. Everyone had prepared for them. The question scratched at him. Why him? There were more visible targets here. The Arqathi envoy, the station governor, Admiral Petrov. He had an answer on a rational level. Removing him would disrupt the fragile lines of trust he had patiently woven between humans and others in the months leading to this day. Remove the quiet glue, and the structure might crack under its own stress. But there was another possibility he had not voiced yet, a half-formed suspicion that lived at the edge of his attention. It was tied to rumors about Nhemari interest in ancient sites and the unusual way humans seemed to interact with some of them. He felt its shape without seeing it clearly, like something moving just beyond a misted viewport. Raffi buzzed his wristcom. "Commander, you asked for flagged reroute patterns?" "Yes. What did you find?" 16 freighters requested last-minute approach changes to sectors with less standard surveillance. 12 are clean. 4 have financial trails that pass through shell companies we have previously linked to Nhemari fronts. Have they docked yet? 3 cleared. 1 is still parked in the Veros Belt's outer ring, waiting on something. Navigation glitch, supposedly. Keep a close watch. If they move near any critical convoy route, I want a ping. Understood. Veros Belt. The name settled in his chest like a small stone. That stretch of treacherous rock and debris had a reputation for ambushes. Too many blind spots. Too many hiding places. He sensed the knot tightening. Trade, summit, Nhemari interest, a suspicious freighter holding position, and a very large portion of the Arqathi delegation scheduled to arrive late, escorted by a Terran outreach detachment through a corridor that brushed dangerously close to Veros. Pieces 1, 2, 3. On a quiet level below, Sira reached a maintenance platform 2 decks above the southwestern gallery. Through a grated opening, she could see part of the summit hall, the wide circular table, chairs arranged in arcs, translator drones hovering like compliant insects in their docking nests. She pushed her focus outward, mapping angles. The hall itself was a difficult kill zone. Too many shields, too much structural reinforcement. But the access corridors and viewing galleries, her attention caught on a raised dais where Milan Karungi currently stood, directing the placement of last-minute seating with a blend of courtesy and quiet authority. He did not look like the legends. He was not especially large. His face was not particularly striking by Khareth standards. His shoulders carried the weary set of someone who had spent too many hours awake. What did match the stories was the way others instinctively left a bit of space around him, not out of fear but expectation, as if they anticipated he might suddenly need room to move. Sira adjusted the handheld rangefinder built into her glove, confirming distances to likely kill positions. She calculated ballistic paths, cover points, escape vectors. She did not feel anything about the man himself. He was a target, defined by coordinates and probability. Still, as she watched him intercept a flustered catering worker about to bump into an Arqathi aide, then guide them both through a moment of embarrassment with a joke that she could not hear but saw land well, she amended her data. He was quick on his feet, socially, comfortable within chaos. Humans did that, she had heard. They made turbulence feel deliberate. She left the viewport and moved on. The first real chance would not come here. It would come when not all eyes were on him, when he stepped outside of the perfectly lit corridors where cameras and honor guards multiplied. Her intel had provided one such opportunity. 3 hours later, the Terran Outreach escort group burned toward the Veros belt with the second Arqathi shuttle at its heart. Asterion Gate had quietly reassigned the route because of traffic density and the promising presence of a trusted independent freighter that could provide real-time hazard data from within the belt. The trusted freighter was a Nhemari Catspaw. The hazard was part of the plan. Milan stood in the small docking bay of his escort cutter, the helmet at his side, watching the shimmer of the belt grow on the forward display. Jagged rock and metallic debris caught starlight at odd angles, a glittering, deadly river. Ludmilla Kadir clipped her mag boots to the deck beside him, helmet under her arm. "I still say you shouldn't be the one going out there personally," she muttered. "And I still say if I'm asking our friends out there to trust us with their safety, then I should be close enough to do something about it if it goes wrong," he replied. "Sir, that kind of logic is going to get you killed eventually. Not today, hopefully." He could feel the unspoken weight in her tone. He was important to too many things now. His loss would not just be personal grief for some. It would be a signal to allies and enemies alike. He did not dwell on that. You could not do the job he did while constantly calculating your own net value. The comm crackled. "Escort lead. This is Arqathi Shuttle 2. Our preliminary scans align with your hazard chart. Proceeding as filed," Milan answered. "Copy, Shuttle 2. We will overlap your sensor sweep. Stay tight." Umbral knife drifted already inside the belt, thrusters damped. Sira Kathani watched the tiny, moving lights of the Terran and Arqathi craft appear on her tactical display, emerging from the brighter glare of open space. She had chosen her position carefully. A hollowed asteroid with an iron-rich core, rotating slowly with a period she had already compensated for. The hollow section, cut and reinforced by her own hand, provided both shelter and line of sight. Mag clamped to the interior wall, she checked the long rifle assembled in front of her. Piece by piece, it had come together from innocuous components, smuggled into the station, and then out again. Now, in this darkness, it was whole, its barrel pointed at a point in space where Milan Karungi's body would pass for several precious seconds. She whispered the math under her breath, a quiet litany. Relative velocity, distance, drift, rotational variance. Her hand did not shake. She had not missed a contract in 12 years. Through the scope, she saw the Terran escort cutter shift slightly. Small bursts of adjustment thrusters. Milan stepping into a maneuvering pod outside, tether attached to the hull, assisted by 2 armored Marines. He wanted to physically check the docking seals on the Arqathi shuttle as it threaded between belt fragments. It was an absurd, unnecessary human thing to do. From a tactical perspective, it made her job easier. Exposure in open space. Predictable path. She settled her cheek against the rifle's stock and timed her breathing to the slow rotation of her hide. The target moved closer. Her scope adjusted to compensate for glare. Inside Milan's helmet, the Varos belt shone like a frozen storm. He watched the Arqathi shuttle glide near, its hull lights playing over ancient stone. Meteor scars on the rocks. Looked for a moment, like old burn marks from forgotten battles. Rafi's voice came in his ear. "Commander, that freighter we flagged? It just lit engines and is altering course. Projected intersection with your route in 20 minutes. Any other day, he would have altered the convoy's path. But the belt did not offer clean choices. Shifting debris fields, gravitational eddies, changing course suddenly could cause more collisions. Can we get a visual? He asked. Too much clutter. As soon as you do, let me know. And see if they answer hails. He cut the channel, unease gnawing. The freighter's timing was too neat. He floated a short distance from the cutter now, tether extended, checking one of the external couplings as the Arqathi shuttle slid into position on the opposite side. His mind tracked details of the metal beneath his hands, the tiny vibration of stressed bolts, the hiss of his own breath. Something pricked at the back of his awareness. A flicker of reflection on a distant rock? A hairline shift in the pattern of glinting debris? He rotated, slow enough not to alarm the Arqathi watching him through their own viewports, and zoomed his helmet's visual overlay toward the largest nearby asteroid cluster. At first, there was nothing but jagged silhouettes. Then, very faintly, he caught the momentary glint of something artificial adjusting. A scope, a filtered lens, recalibrating to the belt's changing light. His pulse kicked. Years of exposure to ambushes, to little signs of wrongness, connected dots. He snapped his tether's motor to maximum and whipped himself along the cutter's hull, interposing part of its mass between him and that suspicious glimmer. Inside the hollow asteroid, Sira cursed softly and rolled her rifle an instant before pulling the trigger. Her line of sight had been clean, then obscured by the escort cutter's sudden movement. Her shot went wide, burning an invisible path through vacuum, scoring a bright scar along a tumbling rock. "Target has seen you," she hissed to herself. Outside, alarms flared in Milan's suit as his environmental sensors registered the energy discharge nearby. Ludmila's voice barked in his ear. "We've got a shot. Source, unknown, external. Commander, get back inside." "Negative." Milan swung himself toward the cutter's airlock even as he spoke. "Source is that asteroid cluster off port. Boarding team, go." Ludmila did not argue. Her squad, already in their armor and clipped to rails inside the cutter, launched along pre-assigned vectors, small flares of thrusters marking their acceleration. Their presence was what Sira had expected. Their speed was not. She had planned for a clean kill and a decoy discharge to draw pursuit while she slipped deeper into the belt. Instead, she found herself with seconds before a half-dozen armored humans slammed into her hide. Fine, she thought coldly. Improvised scenario. She scuttled along the interior curve of the hollow, using her boots sparingly, minimizing vibration. Her rifle's long barrel was no longer ideal at the range she anticipated. She collapsed it with a practiced twist and drew shorter weapons from thigh holsters. Human Marines hit the outer surface of the asteroid with the confidence of those used to things trying to kill them. Ludmila led them, scanning for entry points, trusting the tiny anomalies in her suit's sensors that Raffi had tweaked to catch unnatural cavities. "There," she said, pointing at a faint temperature irregularity. "Cut us an opening." They worked fast. A shaped charge blew a neat hole into the hollow interior, venting dust into space. Ludmila swung through, weapon up. Sira was already on the move. She had anchored herself to the far curve with a flexible cable and waited, ears tuned to the subtle echo of entry. When the first marine silhouette appeared against the brightness of the breach, she fired. Her shot took the lead marine's weapon offline and spun him, suit alarms shrieking as his systems compensated. Before he could stabilize, she released her tether and hurled herself across the hollow, using his drifting body as temporary cover. Ludmila cursed as a second shot ricocheted off her shoulder plate, warning indicators flaring. She fired back, but Sira's movement did not line up with her expectations of how an enemy should move. The Khareth assassin flowed along the interior with an economy of motion that gave her no clear target. In the cutter, Milan slapped the airlock panel and shoved himself inside. He tore off his helmet as soon as pressure equalized. "Patch me into the squad's feed," he barked at the nearest tech, his sight overlaid with Ludmila's helmet cam. He watched, eyes narrowing, as Sira flickered in and out of view. light bending oddly around her chameleon-lined suit. "Offset your targeting by 1/10 of a second," he told Ludmila. "She is timing her movements against your response lag." "How do you know it's a she?" He almost smiled. "Pattern of movement, and the dossier I'm not officially supposed to have read on Khareth assassins." "Understood. Adjusting." Ludmila shifted her stance, deliberately misleading. A Marine on her right stepped forward as if preparing to fire, then ducked back, drawing Sira's attention for a fraction of a second. Sira took the bait, adjusting her own trajectory. Milan saw it, recognized the classic Khareth flanking strategy from hours of training sims. He grabbed a sidearm from the rack and headed back to the airlock. "Sir, you are not going back out there," the tech protested. "Yes, I am." Milan's voice had no heat, only iron. "She is here for me. If I am not present, she will slip away and try again in a less manageable environment. Open the lock." The tech hesitated for half a heartbeat, then obeyed. Humans, even those trained to protect leaders, understood that sometimes the center had to put itself back into danger for the pattern to resolve. Milan shot out of the cutter again, this time angling directly for the breached asteroid. His path cut an intersecting line with Ludmila's squad, who were now trading sporadic shots with Sira inside. Sira, hearing new vibrations, altered her calculations. Another body entering the chamber changed the flow of battle. She tabbed a microcharge from her belt and slapped it against the interior wall, setting a timed detonation that would collapse part of the hollow, shielding her retreat route. She would not get the kill today. The scenario had gone off the rails, and professional pride did not justify martyrdom for clients who used her family as bargaining chips. She needed to cut losses and withdraw. Then a new form slid through the breach, body language immediately recognizable, even inverted and partially occluded. Milan Karungi. She saw him with a clarity that burned. The target had come into the kill box willingly. He did not move like a panicked prey. He came in low, pushing off the edge of the breach, using the spin of the hollow to his advantage. His sidearm tracked her position with unnerving accuracy, predicting where she would be, not just where she was. He fired. The shot grazed her shoulder, sending a jag of pain down her arm. Her own return fire went wide, scarred the interior shell. In another life, on another day, she might have admired the sheer nerve. Right now, she cursed and pushed herself behind a protruding strut, assessing. Her fingers brushed the shape of a second detonator on her belt. Not the wall charge, but the one wired into the failsafe on her own suit. A small, vicious device that would turn her and a good portion of this hollow into fast, unsalvageable shrapnel. If capture became inevitable, no one would dissect her methods. No one would interrogate her about her client. That had always been the understanding. She felt for it now, mind calculating. Detonate here. Take out a Terran commander and several Marines. The Nhemari Pact would count it as fulfillment of contract. Even if the location differed, her clan would be spared. "Freeze!" Milan's voice echoed oddly in the hollow suit speakers, compensating for thin air. It sounded close. Sira stayed in cover, fingers tightening on the detonator's trigger plate. "You are injured," he continued. "Your next moves are either to surrender or complete your suicide protocol. You were given a suicide protocol, right?" She did not answer. Ludmila's squad tightened their formation, covering angles. Their aim no longer swung wildly, reacting. It anticipated, corralled. "You know I am right," Milan said. "Clients who move money through Nhemari fronts rarely hire talent like you without built-in insurance." He shifted his own position, keeping the bulk of the strut between them from her perspective, denying her a clean shot, even as he risked glimpses. "You have two options," he said calmly. "You can choose death on their terms, or you can listen to an offer and then decide whether to die for people who threatened your family." That made her hand stop. He had no way to know about the clan guarantee. None. Nhemari and Khareth both guarded such arrangements fiercely. But he had guessed correctly. "How do you know about that?" she said, her voice emerging harsher than she intended. "Pattern," he replied simply. "I studied the way your people take contracts, the sums involved, the client's reach. There is only one way they could afford you and still view you as expendable. His accuracy unsettled her more than his weapon. "You think I will believe you will help my clan?" she asked. "You have no leverage there. Humans are remarkably good at showing up where we are not wanted," Milan said dryly. "Give us coordinates and an excuse, and we will wedge ships into any political gap. Rescue missions are our excuse of choice. We like thinking we are saving someone." She heard the bitter humor in his voice. And something else, a terrible sincerity. "You would turn on your own allies to protect an enemy's family?" she pressed, seeking the limit. "If my allies object to saving non-combatants from retaliation," he answered, "then they are not the allies I thought I had." Ludmila muttered under her breath, "He's serious, too." It was not an objection, more a resigned acknowledgement. Sira weighed. The wall charge's blinking indicator ticked down seconds. She flicked a remote override to disarm it. Gravel dribbled down as the adhesive's microclamps relaxed, but the structure held. The detonator on her suit still sat under her hand, one press away from ending her options. "Step out," Milan called. "Slowly. Hands away from your belt. If you move too fast, my people will shoot, and even if you trigger your device, you will not get what you came for." "What makes you think I came for you?" she said, stalling. He laughed, a short, humorless sound. "Because I stepped into the line of fire, and you recomputed your shot. You adjusted for me. Your instinct targets significance, not convenience." The fact that he had seen that in the chaos made her fingers ease slightly on the trigger. She stepped from behind the strut, movements exaggeratedly slow, hands lifted away from her weapons. Her shoulder burned steadily. Her eyes, slitted against the light, took in the positions of every Marine, the angles of fire, the ready tension. They did not look at her like prey. They looked at her like a mind to be managed and a body to be contained. Milan moved forward a fraction, weapon steady. He studied her, catching details. Khareth bone structure, the fine control in her posture, the cold analysis in her gaze. "I am assuming you have a name," he said. "I would prefer to use it rather than calling you assassin in my reports."
"Sira Kathani," she said bluntly.
"You are wasting time." In my experience, people on the brink of killing themselves rarely complain about wasted time, he replied. "You must therefore have part of you that prefers to listen." He could see it now, in the small shifts around her eyes. Wariness, not fanaticism. A sense of obligation twisted with personal pride. He lowered his weapon a centimeter. "Help us," he said. "Tell me who hired you, how they move, what they fear. In return, I will make it my mission to push my resources where they need to be, to keep your clan out of retaliation zones. I will treat you like a consultant, not a prisoner. You may even get paid, if we both survive long enough for the accountants to complain." Ludmila's eyebrows twitched. "Sir, did you just try to hire the person who shot at you?" "Yes," he said without looking away from Sira. "She is obviously good at her job. It would be a shame to waste that." Sira understood recruitment when she heard it. In Khareth culture, it usually came with more threats and less generosity. "You are either lying very well," she said slowly, "or you are one of the most dangerously sincere people I have met." "Humans do sincerity like other people do armor," Milan said. "We wear it into stupid places." Silence stretched in the hollow, punctuated only by the faint creaks of settling stone. Sira thought of her clan's holdings, of children who had never left their orbital arcologies, of elders whose only knowledge of humans came from stories. She thought of the Nhemari Pact's cold message, "You fail, they suffer." She thought of the fact that the man offering her a way out had just thrown himself into a kill zone to prevent her from completing a contract. Slowly, very slowly, she removed the detonator from her belt and let it float in front of her. Ludmila lunged forward, snagging it into a sealed container, breathing easier. "I will listen," Sira said. "For now." Milan nodded once. "For now is all anyone ever gets." Asteroid gate did not tilt when umbral knife was impounded, and its captain escorted under heavy guard to a secure chamber. The banners in the summit hall did not dim. The Solara Accord speeches proceeded. Admiral Petrov's calm voice reassured delegates that a minor security incident had been resolved. But somewhere beneath the formal phrases, something fundamental had shifted. An assassin who had come to end a human's influence now sat across from him at a bare metal table, wristbands deactivated but still clasped on as a reminder. Her eyes tracked every turn of the ventilation fan above them, every subtle change in Milan's posture. He explained his theory. The Nhemari Pact did not just want chaos here, he said. They could have bombed an outlying colony for that. They want this summit broken in a way that makes humans and Arqathi distrust each other for a long time. Killing me during the talks would have been dramatic, but predictable. Killing me while I am escorting Arqathi in hostile space? That misdirects blame beautifully. Sira offered what little she had been given. Payment routes, shell companies, the specific, distinctive communications cadence of her handler. Rafi, listening in via secure link, took those fragments and began spinning webs of data on his terminal, chasing ghosts through circuit after circuit. Keiko, watching Sira's expression, saw signs of something unusual for someone in her profession. Curiosity. "You could have refused this contract," Keiko said at one point. "No," Sira corrected. "Not after they tied it to my clan. That is a line that should not be crossed lightly in my culture. But they crossed it, which tells you how frightened they are of your people's influence here." "How frightened?" Milan asked. "Enough to hire me," Sira said without arrogance. "Enough to threaten Khareth clans, which they usually try to keep as allies. They are moving quickly, and when people move quickly, they make mistakes." One such mistake emerged in Rafi's analysis 2 shifts later. A repeated pattern in encrypted bursts through a relay near Tessara, a frontier world noted more for its mineral wealth than its political significance. Keiko pulled up old survey records. "There is something else on Tessara," she said slowly. "Here, in deep crust scans, some kind of structured lattice. It runs under almost a third of the planet's surface." "Natural?" Milan asked. "Doubtful. It has too much regularity. And some of these readings match anomalies detected near ancient ruins in 3 other systems. The Arqathi's archives call it the Echo Lattice. No one has ever fully accessed it, and the Nhemari are interested," Milan murmured. Rafi overlaid the relay bursts with known Nhemari front activity. The shapes that formed looked like grasping hands converging on a single point. "Whatever they are doing on Tessara," he said, "they want us far away from it. Killing you here was meant to keep us occupied, and to poison the Solara Accord." Keiko added another layer to the map. Brief, faint incidents of psychic resonance reported by explorers who had stumbled near similar structures in the past. Humans among them had survived with partial data. Others had suffered severe mental trauma. Human neural patterns interacted differently with these anomalies, she said. More resiliently somehow. It is not a definitive study, but the trend is there. "Meaning?" Admiral Petrov asked. "Meaning," Keiko replied, "that if the Nhemari intend to harness the Echo Lattice as a weapon or control mechanism, human minds might be both key and obstacle. Kill certain humans. You remove potential resistors, or potential saboteurs." Sira listened, inner calculations shifting. The job she had accepted had not been about killing a single man after all. It had been part of a move on something deeper, older, and more far-reaching. "If they seize this lattice," Milan said softly, "and turn it into a device that amplifies fear, they could fracture alliances from a distance. Whole sectors could fall apart without a shot fired in open space. And humans would be blamed." Telgor Sildrak added, his voice tight. "Your species already has a reputation for volatility. If others suddenly feel inexplicable terror around you, they will not suspect subtle ancient machines. They will suspect you." It was a perfect Nhemari plan. Use old power, new fear, and human impulsiveness to reshape the board, unless someone stepped onto Tessara first. The Arqathi Council wanted to delay, study, convene more committees. Milan understood their caution. He also understood the cost of waiting. "What is it with humans and charging ahead?" Telgor asked Milan privately when the council session broke without consensus. "We prefer to think of it as stepping in when no one else will," Milan replied. "Someone has to be wrong first to find out if the path is survivable. And if you are not only wrong, but too late, then we die trying," Milan said. "But at least we do not sit comfortably while others are bent to someone else's will." Telgor found the logic frightening and, to his dismay, compelling. When Admiral Petrov ordered the Terran outreach fleet to set course for Tessara with a token Arqathi contingent, Telgor went with them. He told himself it was to observe. In truth, something in him wanted to see up close what made these humans move the way they did. Sira went because her clan's safety now hinged on the Nhemari's failure, and because, though she would not admit it yet, curiosity had taken root like a small, stubborn seed. She had seen humans fight with courage. She wanted to see what they did with power they did not fully understand. Aboard TOF Resolute, the flagship, the jump to Tessara's coordinates felt longer than usual. On the observation deck, Sira stood with hands clasped behind her, staring at the smear of light that marked their passage. She did not like being on someone else's vessel without control of the engines. But the hum of human-made systems had a certain rough honesty to it. Less elegant than some Khareth designs, but aggressively functional. Footsteps approached. She did not turn immediately. Milan stopped beside her, leaving a respectful gap. "If you are going to kill me," he said conversationally, "this would be a less than ideal place. Compartments are very hard to seal in a vacuum breach this deep into the hull." "If I wanted you dead now," Sira replied, "I could have killed you while you slept on the station." Fair point. He studied her profile. There was little sign now of the wound on her shoulder. Human medics had patched her well. She carried herself with the quiet control of someone used to being the most dangerous person in the room. On this ship, that was debatable. "What do you think we will find on Tessara?" he asked. "Trouble," she said. "That is guaranteed. I meant specifically." She hesitated. "Your Dr. Duarte's hypothesis respects the data. Something under that planet's surface can reach minds. The Nhemari will try to shape that reach. They like control. They understand fear. They will not understand restraint." "And humans?" he asked. "You do not understand restraint either," Sira said. "But your lack of it looks different. You throw yourselves between threats and others, even when it is strategically foolish. You enter enemy hollows to talk assassins out of detonating themselves. I have killed for less cause than some of the risks you have taken in the last 2 days." "Regrets?" he asked lightly. "No," she said, surprising herself. "Not yet." He sensed the yet lingering in her mind, poised like a knife that could flip either direction. Later, in the war room, Raffi brought in a new presence. "Independent broker Ruvan Jekser," he said. "Met him twice on Asterian Gate. He has information, and a disturbing number of chewing sticks. Ruvan, short and broad, with skin that shimmered in shifting hues, grinned around the fibrous stick in his mouth. "Commander Karungi, or do you prefer target that did not die when scheduled?" "I prefer Milan," he said. "What do you have for us?" "Freight logs. I moved some cargo for Nhemari proxies a month ago, through the Varos belt. Big things, sealed. They said they were mining equipment. My gut said otherwise. My gut is very reliable, especially when it wants to avoid being cut open for failing clients." He spread out holo logs. Sira leaned in. Her eyes narrowed as she recognized spec codes on the containers. "Resonance amplifiers," she said quietly. "Meaning?" Admiral Petrov asked. "Devices that interact with neural patterns," Keiko explained. "They can heighten certain emotional states, suppress others. In the right configuration, they can create suggestible populations. In the wrong configuration, they can drive entire stations to madness." "And they sent them to Tessara," Milan said. Ruvan nodded. "I tracked the payout. It went through enough shells to make a turtle blush, but the end signature smelled Nhemari. So when your analyst here offered me safe harbor in exchange for sharing, I decided I like breathing more than I like secrets. They did not have the luxury of double-checking every detail. The pattern was clear enough. When TOF Resolute dropped from jump near Tessara, they emerged into a sky already crowded. Ships ringed the planet like a partial necklace, some marked with known Nhemari affiliate flags, others with the colors of smaller factions that owed the Pact favors. Orbital platforms had been hastily assembled, barely legal bombardment arrays grafted to their sides. Admiral Petrov's jaw tightened. "Well," he said, "at least we are not too early." He opened a channel on general hail frequencies. "This is Admiral Jonah Petrov of the Terran Outreach Fleet," he said, his voice firm and unhurried. "We have reason to believe that unauthorized excavation and dangerous technology tests are being conducted on Tessara. We are here to ensure the safety of all sapient life in this sector. Withdraw from orbit and stand by for inspection." The reply came after a pause long enough to count as deliberate insult. "Outreach Fleet," a voice drawled, thick with contempt. "You have no jurisdiction here. Tessara's orbital space is under provisional control of the Veros Trade Consortium." "The Veros Trade Consortium is a shell," Rafi muttered. "They cobbled it together for this operation." Milan listened to the back and forth with part of his mind, another part picturing the underground caverns they had modeled, the structure of the prime conduit, deep under Tessara's crust. "Admiral," he said quietly, "they're going to stall you up here while they finish whatever they are doing below." "I know," Petrov replied. "You are going down there with a team. Thought you might say that." Telgor, standing near the tactical display, inhaled sharply. "You would risk surface incursion with hostile orbital control?" "Yes," Milan and Petrov said together. Preparations were almost routine now. Ludmila gathered her Marines, checked weapons, ran quick responses to scenarios. Keiko assembled a case with improvised interface tools, neural monitors, and something that looked suspiciously like a portable music player. Rafi loaded mapping data into compact projectors and attached a small drone to his belt for extended signal reach. Sira, strapped on lighter armor, tested the balance of new weapons provided by human quartermasters. They felt different in her hands, but good. The part of her that had always enjoyed the clean geometry of threat and response coiled in anticipation. They descended in a small, fast dropship, its hull designed to swallow minimal fire. Tessara's atmosphere greeted them with a wash of turbulent air, thick with particulate dust. The planet below was all harsh ridges and deep valleys, its surface scarred by old mining operations and fresh drill sites. As the dropship threaded through jagged peaks, they saw Nhemari facilities below, hasty outposts, mobile rigs, drill spires driven into the ground at odd angles. "We are coming in near the nearest suspected conduit access," Rafi said over the roar, marking a point on their interior display. "The planet's crust is thinner here. They had to exploit that." The dropship flared and settled in a shallow canyon, hidden from direct line of sight from most of the Nhemari structures. The ramp dropped with a hydraulic hiss. "Tight perimeter," Ludmila ordered. "Keep your helmet sealed. This dust is not rated for lungs, human or otherwise." They moved quickly. A low-running pack against a reddish-brown landscape. The air tasted metallic through filters. The ground vibrated faintly, as if something deep beneath them thrummed with a pulse. Sira felt it through her boots and frowned. "The lattice is awake," she murmured, "or being pushed toward it." "What does that mean for us?" Rafi asked. "Unpredictable effects," Keiko said. "Stay alert to intrusive thoughts that feel not yours." "That is every thought I have about walking into enemy fire," Ludmila muttered. They reached the first Nhemari outpost with little trouble. The bulk of enemy ground forces seemed focused elsewhere, perhaps on fortifying the primary excavation site. The outpost bristled with unfamiliar equipment. Inside, they found technicians either unconscious or curled in fetal positions, eyes wide, muttering to themselves. The resonance devices hummed with low, insistent tones that seemed to burrow into the skulls of those nearby. Keiko quickly disabled the nearest amplifier, wincing as its tone climbed to a shriek and then cut off. "They are already testing," she said, teeth clenched. "On their own people. They always start there," Sira said. "Easier to justify losing a few expendable technicians than angering someone powerful." One of the technicians, a Nhemari with shaking hands, grabbed Milan's sleeve as he passed. "Stop it!" the man rasped, voice raw. "Stop them. It does not stop on its own." "What does not?" Milan asked, kneeling so their helmets almost touched. "The echo," the man whispered. "It feeds on what they give it, and then it takes." Keiko met Milan's eyes over the prone figure. There was no need to say it aloud. They had to reach the prime conduit. The path down grew treacherous. Caverns opened one after another, lit by flickering work lamps and the eerie glow of alien machinery. The further they descended, the more intense the background vibration became, a throbbing that seemed to sync with heartbeats and thoughts. At the threshold of the deepest chamber, Sira staggered for half a step, catching herself with a hand on the wall. For an instant, her vision blurred, and she saw, overlaid on the rock, images that were not hers. An ocean under a purple sky, a city of spires sinking in slow motion, a room full of faceless beings arguing. "Do you feel that?" she asked. "Yes," Milan said, "and more." He had always been sensitive to patterns, to subtle shifts. Here, in front of the prime conduit, that sensitivity became a double-edged sword. The conduit dominated the chamber, a massive structure rising from the rock like a column of interwoven roots and circuits. It pulsed with light in complex rhythms, not random, not mechanical, but disturbingly close to something like thought. Cables ran from its base to banks of Nhemari-built devices, resonance amplifiers tuned to inject specific emotional frequencies. The hum in the air had settled into a jagged, anxious tone. Keiko's instruments confirmed their fears. "They have already seeded part of the lattice with a fear-dominant profile," she said. "It is spreading, but slowly. There is still time to overwrite it if we can impose a stronger pattern." "How?" Ludmila asked bluntly. "We cannot just talk at it very sternly." Keiko's answer was equally blunt. "We need someone to connect to it, to let it read a different mind, a different baseline, and hope that mind does not shatter in the process." Milan felt the chamber's vibration synchronizing closer with his own pulse. Images flickered at the edges of his awareness. Glimpses of other nodes. Weaker echoes of the same structure on distant worlds. He felt like someone standing at the edge of a vast web, wind tugging at each strand. "It is reacting to you already," Keiko said, watching her monitors. "Your neural pattern is unusually adaptive. The way you process fear and duty, it likes that, or rather, it can use that." "What happens if we do nothing?" Telgor asked quietly. Keiko did not sugarcoat it. "The Nhemari pattern wins. The lattice broadcasts fear and obedience wherever its nodes reach. Alliances collapse. Whole populations become more pliable for whoever can match that signal. Some beings will break entirely. And if we interface with it?" Milan asked. "Best case, you imprint a new baseline that counters the Nhemari seed," Keiko said. "The lattice would echo courage, balanced with caution, empathy balanced with resolve. It might help stabilize affected populations instead of destabilizing them." "Worst case?" Sira prompted. "Your mind snaps," Keiko said softly. "It might take pieces of you and scatter them through the lattice. We do not know if you would still be you afterward." Silence pressed in, heavy as the rock overhead. Humans had stories about such choices. Sacrifices. One person stepping into something lethal to spare others. Those stories rarely mentioned the practical, grinding fear that came with contemplating real death, or worse, obliteration of self. Milan thought of his own fear, its shape. It had never been about dying, not really. It had been about failing people who had trusted him, leaving gaps others could not fill quickly enough. He weighed that against the possible impact of doing nothing. "I will do it," he said. Ludmila swore, a heartfelt expulsion. "Sir, that is not a tactical decision. That is a necessary one," he interrupted gently. "You know as well as I do that we do not have time to find someone else whose brain matches this thing's tastes." Sira stepped forward, eyes burning. "You do not go in alone." He turned toward her sharply. "You are not trained for I am trained to compartmentalize thought," she shot back. "To firewall emotions when they undermine function. That is what my people do, what my work has required. If you go into that alone, your sincerity will drown you. You will feel everything at once. That lattice will devour you." "You intend to shield him?" Telgor asked, disbelief evident. I intend to share the load, she said, and to make sure that if he starts slipping, someone with a less expansive conscience is inside to pull him back. Keiko's fingers flew over her devices, calculating. It could work, she said, after a moment. We can rig a dual interface. Pair your neural feeds. The lattice seems capable of multi-target reads. It might appreciate the contrast between your minds.
You say that like you are talking about an art critic,
Rafi muttered. Keiko shrugged. The truth is, we do not know how this thing subjectively experiences anything. We only know it can propagate patterns. They moved quickly, cannibalizing Nhemari control rigs and Keiko's field kit to build a crude but effective interface. Thin filaments with contact nodes would wrap around Milan's and Sira's temples, necks, chests. Cables would link them to the conduit's outer tendrils. As they worked, the vibrations in the chamber intensified. Above, Admiral Petrov's fleet traded fire with Nhemari and proxy ships. The ground shook occasionally with distant impacts as surface batteries spat upward. Ludmila organized a perimeter at the chamber entrance. Marines took positions behind jutting rocks, covering the approach tunnels. Rafi set up sensor tripwires and a scrambling field to make it harder for Nhemari scanners to pinpoint their exact location. Telgor, torn between his people's caution and the impossible thing happening before him, found a place near the edge of the chamber and watched. When the interface harnesses were ready, Milan and Sira stood before the prime conduit. Sira looked at Milan. She saw his fear, not hidden but acknowledged. It sat there with his determination, a twin weight. He did not pretend to be fearless. That, more than anything, made her trust his judgment. We go in together, she said. If I feel you losing yourself, I will remind you who you are. Do not make me regret throwing away a perfectly good detonator. He smiled, despite himself. I will do my best. Keiko attached the first filament to his skin. A cool tingle spread outward. Sira let them place her own contacts without flinching. Stay anchored to something, Keiko said softly. A memory, a promise, a song. Humans find rhythm very grounding. Sira, your people use mantras? We do, she said. I have a few that kept me sane during long stalks. Use them, Keiko advised. And remember, both of you, the lattice will try to amplify whatever you bring in. You must decide what you want echoed. Milan closed his eyes. What do I want echoed? Not his name, not his fears. Faces came to him instead. Rafi, hunched over a console, muttering to himself in delight when he cracked a problem. Ludmila, laughing, helmet off, after a drill that had left everyone exhausted. Keiko, patiently teaching an alien child a human game. Telgor, stiff, slowly relaxing as he realized no one was trying to trick him during a meal. He thought of strangers, too. Colonists he had pulled out of collapsed habs. Pirates who had surrendered, and then, bewildered, found themselves offered jobs guarding the very shipping lanes they had once raided. He thought of a simple, stubborn conviction that had driven him since youth. If you could make the space around you better for others, you tried, even if it hurt. Begin, he said. Keiko triggered the interface. For a moment, nothing. Then the world inverted. Milan felt his sense of self stretch, as if threads attached to his mind were suddenly pulled in all directions. The chamber vanished. His body disappeared from his awareness. He hung in a vast, shifting web of light and sound. He could feel Sira beside him, not physically but as a distinct presence. Her mind was a disciplined, coiled thing, walls layered around a core of sharp, bright intent. Where his thoughts sprawled, connecting memories, associations, emotions in tangled constellations. Hers arranged into precise, functional patterns. The Echo Lattice pressed in. It did not speak in words. It brushed against them with impressions. A sense of ancient activation, long ago, when its structures had first been laid down by beings who thought in rhythms and colors. The memory of countless signals passing along its threads, faint afterimages now. The cold, jagged intrusion of the Nhemari seed, a narrow, repetitive pattern of fear and control wrapped around a command to amplify. It felt like someone shouting the same threat into a crowded room again and again, hoping volume would substitute for truth. The lattice, for its part, felt interested. Of all the shapes pressing into it, the twin presence of Milan and Sira was new. It shifted attention toward them, the way eyes might turn. Sira felt its curiosity like cold fingers at the edge of her thoughts. Instinct made her slam down mental walls. Her training locked into place, compartmentalizing. Emotions that might distract slid into designated corners, acknowledged, then set aside. She became a narrow, clear conduit for certain things and an impermeable barrier to others. The lattice prodded, tested, then stopped pressing on those fronts. It recognized resilience and adjusted. Milan did not block. He could not completely. His mind was not built that way. Instead, he let the impressions roll through him, and then, deliberately, chose what to feed back. Courage that was not bravado, but action in spite of fear. Laughter in danger, not as denial, but as defiance. The memory of putting a hand on a stranger's shoulder and saying, "We will get you out." He thought of Keiko's gentle patience, of Ludmila's fierce loyalty, of Admiral Petrov's weary but unbroken resolve to keep his people alive. He thought of Telgor's cautious hope, of Sira's hard-won willingness to trust, fragile but real. The lattice drank it in, patterns echoed outward, testing. The Nhemari fear seed met them like a jagged chord meeting a new harmony. At first, the dissonance hurt. Milan felt his mind strain, like a rope pulled between two anchors. Sira sensed his faltering and pushed her own presence closer. Focus, she sent, not in words, but in the sharp sword edge of her will. Remember why you are doing this. Images flared in his awareness, drawn from her. A small Khareth child holding a carved toy ship, eyes wide with stories of exploration. A clan elder watching the stars with quiet yearning. The feel of the first rifle Sira had ever held, the weight of expectation and responsibility. She had never told anyone those memories. She had not even recalled some of them in years. But here, in the lattice, there was no point in lying to herself. Milan grasped them, wove them into his own. Protection, he thought, not just of humans, of all those small personal lives that would be crushed under a distant machine's indifferent echo. The lattice responded. It latched onto those threads, amplifying not fear but connection. Where the Nhemari pattern tried to narrow minds into obedience, the new pattern widened them, encouraging recognition of self and others. Above, on Tessara's surface, Nhemari soldiers advancing toward the conduit chambers stumbled. For a heartbeat, their weapons felt heavier. Their resentments at their superiors flared, competing with the fear echo, telling them to obey. Some shook their heads, snarling, and pushed forward. Others hesitated, confused. In orbit, Nhemari commodores barked orders that suddenly sounded shrill to their own crews. A junior officer, always slightly uncomfortable with the ruthlessness required of his position, felt a surge of clear disgust at the bombardment patterns he was inputting. He flinched, hand hovering over the console. Why am I doing this? The Echo Lattice pulsed. It began to pivot, the way a vast instrument might shift from one key to another. In the conduit chamber, alarms shrieked from Nhemari devices as their readings went off scale. Keiko watched in a mix of awe and dread. Resonance inversion, she said. It's broadcasting a different baseline now. We need to hold it long enough to overwrite the seed fully. Milan's body shook where he stood, muscles locking and releasing. Sira's jaw clenched, tendons standing out along her neck. Sweat trickled under the interface contacts. Inside, they walked a knife edge. The lattice was immense, and it wanted to give back what it took. As it absorbed their courage, their stubborn refusal to give up on others, it tried to feed them amplified versions of the same. For a moment, Milan felt an ecstatic surge, the sense that he could connect with every mind in reach, feel every fear, soothe every hurt. Temptation whispered, "You could fix so much. Guide them." He almost leaned into it. Sira saw the shift in his mental texture, the way his humility thinned under the rush. She thrust a blade of thought through the illusion. Remember what you told me, she insisted. You do not want control over others. You want them to choose. She flooded him with a memory he had not known she possessed. The look on his face, in the hollow asteroid, when he had offered to save her clan. There had been no desire to own her, to claim her, only an understanding that leverage corrupted everything. He clung to that self like a lifeline. No control, he told the lattice firmly, to the extent thoughts could have words there. Connection, not puppetry. Echo, not command. It hurt him, slowly. The pressure eased. The fear seed's influence crumbled, overwritten by this new, strange pattern that valued choice and stubborn hope. The lattice seemed to like complexity, not monotony. It preferred a wide, tangled song to a single, blaring note. The prime conduit's pulses steadied. The color of its light shifted toward a cooler, calmer spectrum. Above, Admiral Petrov felt his ship's sensors register a sudden dip in the background psychic noise that had been building since their arrival. The scrambled readings that had made some of his crew twitchy flattened, then reformed into a gentle, almost undetectable hum. He used the moment. "Now!" he shouted. "All batteries! Focus on those platforms! Take out their amplifiers!" Terran guns roared. Arqathi ships, hitherto holding back, surged forward under Telgor's subtler orders. He had seen enough in the conduit chamber to recognize that this was not the time for equivocation. On the ground, Ludmila and her Marines weathered a last, disorganized Nhemari push at the tunnel mouth. The attackers' coordination had frayed. Some shot wild. Others threw down their weapons mid-charge, backing away with hands trembling as if they had woken from a bad dream. "They are losing cohesion," Ludmila reported, breath ragged. "Whatever you are doing down there, it is hurting them." Inside the conduit link, Milan and Sira sagged. Keiko hit the emergency release, severing their connection before the lattice's feedback could roast their neural circuits. Milan collapsed to his knees, then sideways. Sira caught herself awkwardly against a console, chest heaving. Keiko was at Milan's side in an instant, checking pupils, pulse, breathing. He was alive, barely conscious, but present. Sira, vision swimming, looked up at the prime conduit. Its light had settled into a slow, steady rhythm. She could still feel a faint echo of it at the back of her mind, like a distant music you can hear only when everything else is quiet. "You hear it too," she realized, glancing at Milan. "It has marked you." He managed a weak smile. "Next time, we send someone else," he muttered. "Next time, I decline any contract involving ancient galactic infrastructure," she replied. Admiral Petrov's voice crackled over the comm. "Ground team, report. We are driving them from orbit. What is your status?" Keiko replied. "Prime conduit stabilized. Nhemari seed overwritten. Our people are alive, although Commander Karungi is currently horizontal." "Keep him that way for a bit," Petrov said, relief bleeding into his tone. "We will discuss disciplinary commendations later." On decks across TOF Resolute, humans laughed in ragged bursts. It was how they handled surviving impossible things. It took time to mop up the remaining Nhemari presence on Tessara. It took longer for the story of what had happened beneath its surface to ripple outward. But in the essential ways, the crisis had passed. Asteroid Gate did not explode in outrage when the news reached it. Instead, ambassadors and traders and ordinary citizens looked up from their routines, and for a moment considered how close they had come to living under a shadow of fear they could not name. The Solara Accord, far from collapsing, expanded its remit. It now included provisions for monitoring and safeguarding sites linked to the Echo Lattice. Old ghosts had been dragged into daylight. Milan Karungi spent 2 days in a medbay bed before he could stand without the world tilting. During that time, dreams haunted him. Disjointed impressions of alien skies, rushes of emotion, not his own. He would wake with the echo of someone else's panic or joy fading like a receding tide. Sira visited once, stood silently at the foot of his bed, and watched him sleep. When he woke, she did not shift stance. "Congratulations," she said. "You survived making a stupidly noble choice," he groaned softly. "I had help." "Yes," she acknowledged. You did. A beat. My clan sends their thanks. Your people arrived on our orbital stations in time to cut off Nhemari enforcers without escalation. That is unusual. Humans like unusual rescue scenarios, he said. It makes for good stories. Stories, she repeated thoughtfully. Your Dr. Duarte said something similar, that your species is defined by the stories you tell about yourselves. Perhaps that is what the Lattice liked. We are not the only ones who tell stories, he countered. Yours begin in different places, she inclined her head. Perhaps now, some of our stories will include you, without ending in blood. Similarly, quiet shifts unfolded elsewhere. Envoy Telgor Sildrak found himself drafting a proposal to establish a joint Arqathi-Terran commission to study the Echo Lattice and its effects. The suggestion that humans might be entrusted with any sort of guardianship over such power would have been unthinkable a year before. Now, he could not imagine leaving them out. Admiral Petrov stared at the updated duty rosters and knew that the next missions his fleet would undertake would not just be patrols and escorts. They would be pilgrimages to other Lattice nodes, attempts to understand and safeguard structures older than all their mapped borders. Rafi combed through Conduit logs and grumbled happily. Keiko lost herself in data, in interpretations, in the ethics of using something that could so easily become a weapon again. And Sira Kathani, formerly the Blade hired to cut through human stability, accepted a formal role as a counter-hostile operations consultant for the Terran Outreach Fleet. Rumors spread through underworld channels that the Khareth Syndicate had quietly placed a protection marker on her, declaring any attempt to target her clan as an attack on their own interests. On Asterion Gate's observation deck, some weeks later, Milan stood once more staring out at the turning rings, the glitter of traffic. Sira joined him without announcement. They stood in easy silence for a time. You know, she said eventually, when I first watched you on this station, I thought you were an anomaly, a human too comfortable in chaos. I assumed killing you would restore balance. And now? He asked. Now, I think perhaps the galaxy's balance was already broken, she said. Too many old powers hoarding fear. Perhaps something a little more human is needed as counterweight. We do not exactly have a proud history free of fear, he cautioned. We have caused our share. You admit fault, she said, repeatedly, and yet you continue stepping into danger for others. That paradox is what saved us on Tessara. The Lattice chose a baseline that includes contradiction. He chuckled softly. We are good at contradictions. She turned her head, studying his profile. You offered me a choice in that hollow asteroid, she said. No one else in that moment would have. I took it because I did not see an alternative. Now I see it as the beginning of a partnership. Temporary, he teased. Everything is temporary, she replied. But some things last long enough to matter. He knew, even as she spoke, that their path ahead would not be simple. New threats would arise. The Nhemari Pact would not accept defeat quietly. The Echo Lattice itself would remain a question, humming quietly under multiple worlds, reshaped but not tamed. He also knew one other thing, as certainly as he knew the pattern of station traffic and the way his people laughed too loud when they cheated death. Humans would keep stepping forward, not because they were fearless or perfect, but because they were stubborn enough to believe that partnership with former enemies, risking themselves for strangers, and touching minds with inscrutable machines were acceptable prices to pay for a slightly better future. He could feel, far below thought, the faintest thread of the Lattice's echo, like a distant star humming a familiar tune. Courage and caution, empathy and resolve, tangled in a song that had borrowed something from him and something from Sira, and spun it into something larger. Out beyond Asterion Gate, beyond Tessara, beyond even the Veros Belt, ships of many species would one day feel that tune. Some would fear it, some would be angered by it, some would take heart from it. But they would all, in ways subtle or sharp, have to reckon with the fact that the galaxy's deepest whisper now carried a distinctly human note.